A youth corrections officer has been arrested, accused of having a sexual relationship with a parolee.
In Michigan, a female deputy is now sitting in a jail cell after an improper relationship with an inmate.
Former detention officer with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office has now been arrested. That's 36-year-old Kowana Jenkins. She's accused of inappropriate behavior with an inmate.
And you got a live-ass fucking head game. Oh, my God. You in bed?
Don't even get me thinking about that. It makes me so horny.
It gets you horny?
Oh, yeah.
December 2019, corrections officer Tina Gonzalez cut out a hole in her uniform and had full intercourse with an inmate while 11 others watched on. While this perverted act sent shockwaves across California, what happened next to Gonzalez changed the course of her life forever. Here are 10 dirty female cops caught with inmates. Melissa Goodwin.
Melissa Goodwin fell for a crook and lost her job and reputation because of it. Goodwin was also accused of having a sexual relationship with the inmate.
It's been going on for several months, since November last year. We have confirmed that there has been correspondence between this female officer and the inmate.
August 2021, then 26-year-old Melissa Goodwin, an officer at Silverwater's Metropolitan Remand Center, got herself involved in a twisted love triangle between two men who once did jail time at Silverwater. It all started in December 2019 when Goodwin was accused of giving fellatio to a 21-year-old inmate, Corey London. Investigators allege that Goodwin performed this act on London at least 5 times every month between December 2019 and April 2020 in a storeroom within the facility. However, during this same time, Goodwin was involved in this romantic relationship with a former inmate and regional leader of the Rebels Outlaw motorcycle gang, Caleb Valerie. Goodwin's relationship with Caleb was reported to be extremely toxic, and she was once charged for biting him during an argument at their Liverpool home in West Sydney. This would steer Goodwin toward London, as she saw him as an escape from Caleb's toxicity. She would help Caleb smuggle contraband like cigarettes, chewing gum, and a cell phone. A few months later, an official investigation was launched due to CCTV capturing Goodwin and Caleb going in and out of their rendezvous. Corey London was interrogated concerning this, and he indeed confessed to having an intimate relationship with Goodwin. Consequently, Goodwin was fired and charged with engaging in an intimate relationship with an inmate. That's where her real story kicks in. The police searched London's cell and found a letter written to him by Goodwin, reading,
"Miss you heaps. If only you were out before Valentine's Day. I don't know if you truly understand the risks and consequences I'm taking for you. I hope I'm right this time."
Now, this letter was used as evidence to implicate Goodwin's abuse of power. However, after she was arrested, Corey London was brutally attacked in his prison cell. Why, you ask? Well, according to our findings, Corey was to testify against Goodwin in court, stating in front of a judge the level of their intimacy and secret relationship. So in turn, prosecutors believed members of Goodwin's boyfriend's gang, who were still incarcerated, attacked Corey to silence him. And they actually did, because when he got to court and climbed the witness stand, he refused to utter a word or respond to the questions asked. The judge was so infuriated by his behavior that he was charged with contempt. Ultimately, since Corey couldn't provide a confession, and with no other evidence backing the prosecutor's claims of Goodwin engaging in full intercourse with him, she pled guilty to just 1 count of engaging in a relationship with an inmate and was given a 12-month community corrections order and 100 hours of community service. Now she lives a free life as an Instagram fitness influencer, while Corey is left to deal with the consequences of both their actions, alone. Tina Gonzalez. Tina Gonzalez had abandoned the very fabric of her principles as an officer as she gave into her depraved sexual desires. December 2019, the Fresno County Sheriff's Office in California received a tip that one inmate at the Fresno County Jail was in possession of a cell phone, and that this same inmate was in an intimate relationship with an officer named Tina Gonzalez. At the time, Tina had worked with the Sheriff's Office for 3 years and a few months, beginning in September 2016, and in those years no one had ever found out about her shenanigans with those inmates in secret locations. The inmate accused of having a relationship with Gonzalez had his cell searched. They found a cell phone, But this phone wasn't the problem. It was what it contained that sent shockwaves around the office. They found hundreds of call logs between Gonzalez and the inmate, along with some text boasting about the crazy things they had gotten into without getting caught. In some portions of the texts, Gonzalez gave the inmate information about when officers were planning their raids and which cells were going to be searched. At the same time, Gonzalez would smuggle in alcohol and razor blades for this inmate, potentially putting her colleagues at risk. However, all these were regarded as the lesser offenses she committed. Later investigations revealed that Gonzalez, with no shame, had full intercourse with this inmate, while 11 others watched on, and she would cut a hole into her uniform, making it a lot easier for them to engage in this act. May 1st, 2020. Fresno County Sheriff's Office detectives arrested Gonzalez from her home. At the time, she was charged with sexual activity with an inmate, possession of a controlled substance in a jail, and a misdemeanor for possession of a cell phone with intent to deliver to an inmate. She pled no contest, while her attorney blamed her obnoxious actions on her struggling marriage. Yeah, you heard that right. She was married, although she did file for a divorce at that time. For Assistant Sheriff Steve McComas, who worked directly above Gonzalez, had this to say.
Cutting a hole in your pants to make it easier to have sex with an inmate and having intercourse in full view of 11 other inmates is something only a depraved mind can come up with.
And despite her crimes, Gonzalez still engaged in sexually explicit conversations with the inmate after her arrest. She was consequently given 2 years and 7 months in prison. Too little for her crimes? We'll let you be the judge of that.
I think what you did was terrible, stupid. You ruined your career. You endangered your fellow officers. But I also believe that people can redeem themselves. You got the rest of your life to prove that.
Kowana Jenkins. March 22, 2023, Fulton County Detention Officer Kowana Jenkins was arrested over an inappropriate video that went viral on X, formerly Twitter, and the video would show her getting involved in a lewd act with an inmate. Although she would face the full weight of her crime, there's some disturbing stuff behind her bizarre relationship with this inmate. December 2019, Jenkins was employed at the Fulton County Sheriff's Office and then was transferred to work as a detention officer at the county's jail. It was while she was working there, she met with an inmate whose identity wasn't specified. However, later investigations revealed that Jenkins and this inmate had a lengthy relationship, with Jenkins actually helping him smuggle a cell phone, recorded on video. In this video, Jenkins was seen sitting at an office inside the facility with the inmate who sat across from her holding up the camera while she committed an improper act on his fingers. No one knows exactly how the video got on social media, but it did, and it sparked a lot of outrage from users who were disgusted by her actions. Subsequently, his cell was raided and the phone was retrieved by authorities. Now, unfortunately for Jenkins, inside that phone was another incriminating video of her kissing the inmate while sitting on his lap. And in that same video, she gave him some luxurious Cartier eyeglasses. Now, she was promptly terminated from that position and arrested on multiple charges. Currently, she's been convicted of 5 counts of violating an oath as a public officer, 2 counts of improper sexual contact as an agent or employee, 1 count of providing an inmate with a prohibited item without authorization, counts of cruelty to inmates, and 2 counts of reckless conduct. She's yet to be sentenced. How much time do you think they're going to give her? Charlene Diane Oden.
Like, what do you mean?
I don't know. You probably got this weird swing hanging from the ceiling. Candace probably thinks it's a swing set.
Oh, if I had that swing, you better believe I'd leave that sucker up for you.
Would you really?
Hell yeah!
Are you in bed?
Don't even get me thinking about that. That makes me so horny.
That was Charlene in this interrogation with the same men she once worked with, giving details about a sex scandal that involved her and another inmate. November 17th, 2021, 33-year-old Charlene gave fellatio and had intercourse with 28-year-old Jacob Parker at the Conroe Montgomery County Jail facility. Now, for context, this jail is located in Texas and happens to be one of the toughest facilities in the state. Diane Oden was a correctional officer and had worked at this facility for over a year, while Parker was awaiting trial for his conviction on drug-related charges, while also having a reputation for being incorrigible by officers. However, despite possessing that attribute, Parker had a soft spot for Diane, and it seemed like she was the only one who could control him to some extent. Soon enough, the duo became really close, and it raised a lot of eyebrows amongst the prison. And whoever thought that these two were up to something fishy, well, they were right. On the day of the incident, Diane alerted her superiors to a drug issue at a specific housing unit within the facility known as B Quad. As a result, all contract workers and cleaners on this unit were removed, and instead, inmates were taken voluntarily to clean this unit. This unit was sparsely populated with inmates, and the CCTV had a lot of blind spots. So on that very day, Diane took her boyfriend to one of those little spots where they both kissed and eventually had intercourse. But here's the thing. For Diane, this was like a one-time thing, and she wasn't willing to take a second risk. However, 1 month after this incident, authorities were alerted to the incident, where Diane and Parker, unaware that their call was being recorded, spoke about their sexual activity. When interrogated about it, she first denied having an intimate relationship, but then their conversation was played for her to hear, and she immediately confessed. Following that, she pled guilty to improper sexual activity with a person in custody, and was given 100 days in jail. As for Parker, certain disciplinary measures were taken against him, although they weren't made public. Amari Waller. January 2019, 25-year-old African-American Amari Waller was employed as a juvenile corrections officer in Arizona. Several months into the job, she encountered an inmate, often referred to as Mike. Mike had previously been at the Adobe Mountain School in Phoenix and had been placed under community supervision in November 2019. However, he remained under the jurisdiction of the juvenile department, and this situation eventually led to Waller facing some legal problems. Waller was fully aware that under Arizona law, it's illegal for anyone employed by the Department of Juvenile Corrections to engage in any sexual activity with an offender who's under the supervision of the department. Yet she flouted that law by getting intimate with Mike while he was in town for community service. This would lead to Mike feeling the need to brag about it to his peers, and unlucky for him, one correctional officer overheard the details. This officer, however, didn't immediately report the case. Instead, they would keep a close eye on Mike for a bit, and then get a hold of his phone, taking photographs of his Snapchat messages with Waller. Then, after having the evidence they needed, they reported the case. January 9th, 2020, Mike was approached by a special investigator into the case. He confirmed his intimate relationship with Waller, but asserted that since he was an adult, their relationship was fully consensual. A parole search of the man's room was conducted, and the investigator found a lot of nude photos and videos of Waller on his cell phone. That same day, Waller was called in for questioning. And just like Mike, she didn't deny their relationship. However, there was a little twist. In a bid to outsmart investigators, Waller ran to the bathroom and used her Apple Watch to call one of Mike's roommates, telling him to inform Mike to delete all their chats, photos, and call logs. Pretty smart move, no doubt. But she was absolutely clueless to the fact that Mike had already given his full-blown confession. Her phone was consequently searched, and nude photos of herself and Mike were found. She was immediately fired and charged with a Class 5 felony for unlawful sexual conduct. There's no report of the eventual sentence given to her, or if Mike himself was penalized, but this case kind of stands out, given that Amari Waller perpetuated such a demeaning act barely a year after taking up a job as a corrections officer. Gemma Cowperthwaite.
She manipulated me in so many ways, and I'm sitting here today because of that manipulation.
July 2014, a 22-year-old female inmate at St. Clair County Jail had an encounter with corrections deputy Gemma Cowperthwaite. Now, Gemma believed that this inmate liked her, despite the fact that the inmate was a repeat offender with 9 felony fraud counts. And regardless of these red flags, Gemma envisioned a genuine connection between them. However, she wouldn't immediately cross the officer-inmate line, even though the inmate pressured her to develop a relationship beyond their professional roles. At one point, the inmate even asked her for her cell phone number, suggesting they could stay in touch after being released, but Gemma had declined that request. A few months go by and this inmate was granted work release from jail and then pleaded with Gemma to take a shower at her home. Gemma, already developing some infatuated bond with this inmate, agreed to that request. However, agreeing to that request has now become Gemma's biggest mistake to date. When Gemma drove the inmate to her apartment and took the shower that she wanted, things got out of hand, and Gemma let her desires cloud her thoughts. Things got intimate, and being that they were consenting adults, she didn't think anything of it. Unfortunately for Gemma, this inmate with her long history of fraud had just run one last fraudulent scheme on her. By the time Gemma got back to work, she found out that this inmate had flipped on her by playing the victim role and accusing Gemma of sexual assault. Gemma was immediately placed on administrative leave as investigations into the case were carried out, and after confessing during interrogations to the claims by this inmate, she was arrested and placed on a $10,000 bond. bond. Consequently, Gemma posted bail, but given the weight of her crime, she could have been sentenced to at least 24 years in prison in solitary confinement if she went to trial. She maintained the position that she didn't have full intercourse with this inmate, but at the same time, how was she going to convince the jury of that? Given that the inmate had a contradicting story, she resigned to fate and decided to take a plea deal.
Why would you accept a plea deal if you didn't actually do the crime?
Because I couldn't handle 2 to 4 years solitary confinement.
By reason of that, Gemma pled guilty to sexual assault with intent to commit penetration and was sentenced to 10 months behind bars. The guilty plea also places Copperthwaite on Michigan's sexual offender registry for life.
I take full responsibility for crossing the professional to the personal line. Absolutely. I have no problems admitting my fault in that.
Shanny AUM. January 11th, 2024. Female prison officer at HMP Birmingham Prison was sentenced to jail for engaging in inappropriate relations with an inmate, Joshua Mullings. Now, their relationship began in 2022 when Begum and Mullings started getting friendly around each other. This would go on for some time, with no one really noticing, given that Mullings was put under Begum's supervision. However, other correctional officers thought otherwise, and as such, launched an investigation into their affairs. Usually, as custom with this prison facility, inmates were rotated to clean up the facility's storeroom during weekdays. However, Begum made sure that Mullings was assigned to this duty more often than other inmates, and anytime he was required to, she would join him while he did it. September 22nd, 2022. A hidden camera was installed in this storeroom in an attempt to catch him red-handed. Between September 22nd and 29th, Begum and Mullings entered this storeroom many times to engage in inappropriate sexual activities. And as you might have guessed, they were caught in full view of that CCTV. On some occasions, Begum would switch off her radio, and anytime other officers tried to reach her, she blatantly ignored their calls. What's crazy here is that sometimes she would be gone for hours. After concrete evidence had been obtained, Begum was consequently fired from duty and arrested. After that arrest, her phone was searched, and her browsing history returned more evidence of her involvement with Mullings. She searched the internet for details of his crimes and lifestyle before incarceration. In her defense, her attorney claimed that Begum was under pressure from her ailing mother to get married, and as such, Mullings was able to see right through her desperation and exploited it. While prosecutors thought this was a very weak defense, and also pretty ridiculous at the same time, the judge had these words to say before finally delivering his judgment.
You and him repeatedly spent time together in that store cupboard to be physically intimate, up to and including penetrative physical acts. You were observed engaging in consensual activity whilst on duty.
She was handed 16 months imprisonment. Jennifer Gavin. In the case of Gavin, like many others, her lack of professionalism led to a romantic relationship with an inmate, but ultimately led to her incarceration. April 2020, 27-year-old Gavin, a correctional officer at HMP Berwyn, got into an affair with 20-year-old Alex Coxon. Now, Coxon of Rees Avenue, Kinmill Bay, was serving time after convictions involving drugs, robbery, and attempted robbery, while Gavin just got out from a lengthy romantic relationship, leaving her vulnerable at that time. As Gavin and Coxon got to know each other, they grew pretty close. Coxon, recognizing her vulnerability, strategically worked to create the impression of a relationship. He would do this by encouraging her to fantasize about a fairy tale life that they could have once he got out. And due to the circumstances surrounding her, she naively fell for it. At one point, he bribed her with £150 to get him a cell phone which would allow them to communicate after her shifts. She also sent him explicit photos of herself through Snapchat and once kissed him while on duty. However, despite her infatuation with him, she refrained from doing anything further than that. And that decision actually helped her get a reduced sentence. But how exactly did they get caught? Well, during a cell raid on inmates, Coxon attempted to hide his cell phone beneath a laptop in his cell. However, officers spotted it, and when he was forced to open it, they found Gavin's photos, automatically incriminating her. When brought in for questioning, Gavin's cell phone was also checked, providing more evidence to their illicit relationship, with her bank statement showing that she had already received money from members of Coxon's family. However, she did have rather an empathetic reason for what she did. According to her, she felt pity for inmates who weren't allowed to have visitors due to COVID restrictions, and at the same time, she was sometimes left to look over an entire unit with more than 80 male inmates. So being empathetic and gullible would lead her down a dirty path. And although she admitted it was indeed a low point in her life, she pled for the judge to show a little mercy. Now, given that she had no other criminal record and was a good standing officer, Jennifer Gavin was sentenced to 8 months in prison, while Coxon was given 4 extra months imprisonment to run concurrently with his former sentence. Emily Watson. April 2019, 26-year-old correctional officer Emily Watson was given 12 weeks in prison for having a relationship with prisoner John McGee at Wrexham Berwyn Prison in Wales. Now, Emily was infatuated by McGee and was seen going into his cell several times during her shift. On 2 different occasions, she would perform little sexual acts on him, while in the other, they would have full-blown intercourse. Now, seeing the attention McGee was getting, certain eyebrows were getting raised within this facility, and a formal investigation was launched. Unfortunately for Emily and McGee, the investigation blew the roof off her secret affair. But there was a little more to their story that left other officers shocked. July 2017, Emily Watson began working in this facility and within the first few months was involved in a separate misconduct case with a prisoner. According to that investigation, she met this other inmate during a BBC Children in Need 3-legged race event, but when queried, abruptly ended their relationship. However, McGee would then show up. He was convicted in December 2015 for driving with his lights off, which resulted in him running over and killing 52-year-old Richard Bratton. McGee also failed to call emergency services, leaving Bratton to die on the highway, but a few hours later cops tracked him down and arrested him. After his apprehension, it was discovered that McGee was already under investigation for supplying cheap drugs to the locals in his neighborhood. Consequently, he was given 8 years in prison, and just after a few years, he used his charm to sway Emily into a romantic relationship. Now, after this relationship was made public, it was discovered that Emily had been in contact with McGee via Instagram on her iPhone 6. The smartphone was hidden inside a PlayStation McGee had in his cell, and he was able to get that phone out using a screwdriver disguised as a pen. The pair had a virtual intercourse via FaceTime, and Emily sent him nude pics and videos of herself all the time. He registered her number under another name, and when she was off her shift, the duo would talk to each other regularly, logging 96 calls in a single month. When probed, Emily was shown countless CCTV footage that caught her delivering food to McGee's cell when he was alone and spending a long time in there before coming out. And probably feeling ashamed, she tendered her resignation, but resigning wasn't going to set her free from facing the law. Due to the fact that Emily had no former criminal record, had a good standing in society, and didn't get involved in any of McGee's shady dealings, she was given a year behind bars. And considering when the incident occurred, she's already back out in society. Emily Davis. Emily Davis let her youthfulness lead her down a path of getting intimate with an incarcerated felon. And as a consequence for those actions, she became a felon herself. In 2019, 22-year-old Emily worked as this correctional officer at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Tennessee. However, along the line, she got increasingly close with one particular inmate. But unlike other female cops so far, Davis wasn't immediately caught. This prison facility was under investigation by the Tennessee Department of Corrections, as investigators had been led to believe that officers were smuggling in contraband for certain inmates. A formal investigation was launched, and it made a shocking discovery. Correctional officers communicated their shady dealings with inmates by using handwritten letters. They would pass them through the bottom of their cells and would deliver them alongside their food trays. Emily Davis used that same mode of communication. However, one of those letters was intercepted by investigators, and its content wasn't what anyone would have imagined. In this letter, Davis addressed her sexual encounter with the inmate and the possibility that she was pregnant. She also expressed her happiness and excitement for this specific sexual encounter that occurred on May 2, 2019. She addressed that letter using her middle and maiden names, Dawn Adams. However, it didn't take much to link her to that letter. June 1, 2019, the inmate was brought in for questioning, during which he admitted to having sex with Davis on 2 separate occasions. As a result, Davis was arrested and charged for having sex with an inmate. However, there are some gaps in her story. Following that arrest, she was released on bail, and surprisingly, there are no online records indicating whether she was eventually sentenced or faced any jail time for this offense. However, the story of Emily Davis, much like those other female cops we've discussed, illustrates how easily trust can be broken and rules can be shattered. A single misguided action driven by their personal desires not only changed their lives, but broke their very oath to ensure safety.